Close your eyes and imagine that Jesus is in front of you. Is the man deep in prayer at Gethsemane of Chinese descent? Is the figure breaking bread at the Last Supper a Navajo elder? Is the one struggling under the weight of the cross on the way to Golgotha a Nigerian man? Or what if the person nailed to that cross were a woman? Chances are, the picture most Americans conjure up is of a slender, bearded man with flowing, chestnut-colored hair. Whether it's the tiny figurine on a car dashboard or the towering Cristo Redentor stretching his arms over Rio de Janeiro, one thing remains constant. He's almost always depicted as a white man. Well, today, I'm here to challenge that image. Elon Musk claims to know more about God than any of us mere mortals, and now he's ready to share his wisdom with the world. This is something that's been burned into our brains for centuries. The stereotypical image of Jesus Christ. You know the one. Tall, lean, flowing, light brown hair, almost angelic with that fair skin and those light eyes. That's the Jesus most people in North America have grown up seeing in paintings, movies, and stained glass windows. But it's 2025, guys. Stereotypes are out. We have got to progress as a society. Have you ever stopped to wonder, where did this image actually come from? Because if Jesus really looked like that, wouldn't people in Jerusalem have been a bit weirded out, considering none of them looked white? Elon Musk wasn't about to just accept this traditional image at face value. Oh no, that's not his style. There's not a single convention this dude is not out to challenge. So now he's set out to answer one of history's biggest mysteries. What did Jesus actually look like? And let me tell you, the findings, my God, do they flip everything we thought we knew on its head? But first, let me take a second to talk about why it's so weird that Jesus is considered to be white. First off, let's talk geography. Jesus was born in Bethlehem and grew up in Nazareth, which means he was a Galilean Semite. People from that region at the time didn't have the fair complexion and light features we often see in Western depictions. And here's a major clue straight from the Bible. When Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had to literally point him out to the soldiers. Why? Because Jesus looked just like his disciples. If he had been the only long-haired, blue-eyed guy around, spotting him would have been a breeze. How did we never question this? And get this, nowhere in the New Testament is Jesus actually described. No ancient sketches, no written descriptions, nothing. We're basically left with a blank canvas. Over time, different cultures reimagined him in their own image. Some saw him as black, others Arab, even Hispanic. But Elon Musk, he wasn't satisfied with imagination. He wanted cold, hard science. But Musk didn't just guess around. He went full forensic anthropology on this. You know, the same techniques used to reconstruct faces from ancient skulls and solve modern crimes? That's what we're talking about. I never expected Jesus' face to be pieced together like a crime scene investigation, but here we are. Elon put together a team of British scientists and Israeli archaeologists to figure this out once and for all. Their mission was to reconstruct the most accurate image of Jesus Christ ever created using science. This involved a mix of genetics, human growth and development, and even fields like primatology, osteology, and paleoanthropology. Think about it. Factors like nutrition, climate adaptation, and even dentistry played a role in piecing this mystery together. And step 1, finding the right skulls. Elon's team needed something solid to work with, so they got their hands on 3 well-preserved skulls from near Jerusalem. That's skulls from the exact time and place Jesus lived. Israeli archaeologists had discovered these years earlier, but now they were about to be used for something groundbreaking. I don't know about you, but I find it wild that we have actual skulls from that time period just waiting for someone like Musk to come along and do something with them. Using computerized tomography, basically high-tech X-ray scans, Musk's team created detailed 3D models of the skulls. Special software then determined how thick the soft tissue would have been at various points on the face. This allowed them to build up the muscle structure and eventually reconstruct the skin over it. I can only imagine the moment they saw a face starting to emerge. Then came the fine details. The team shaped the nose, lips, and eyelids based on the muscles underneath. Using advanced modeling techniques, they applied layer after layer of clay to create a physical cast. And just like that, a face started taking shape. But two big questions remained. What was his hair like? And what color were his eyes? Since a skull can't tell you eye color or hair texture, Elon's team had to turn to archaeology for answers. They examined first-century drawings found at ancient sites. These were created before the Bible was even compiled and gave crucial details, like the fact that Jesus almost certainly had dark eyes, not light ones. As for his hair, the answer came from an unexpected source, the Bible itself. Most Western depictions of Jesus show him with long, flowing locks. But here's something interesting. Paul, one of the key figures of early Christianity, wrote in 1 Corinthians that if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace to him. Now, would Paul really have said that if Jesus himself had long hair? Doubtful. So Musk and his team concluded that Jesus likely had short, tightly curled hair, just like other men of his time and culture. I can't lie. What he eventually revealed to the world completely changed how I pictured Jesus in my head. So anyway, this obviously clashed with one of the most famous images associated with Jesus, the face on the Shroud of Turin. Many believe the shroud was the cloth used to wrap Jesus after the crucifixion, and it depicts a man with long hair. But skeptics have long questioned the shroud's authenticity, and in the face of historical evidence, Musk's team dismissed the long-haired look. Also, good news for the short kings. Jesus was likely much shorter than we've been led to believe. Forget the towering, broad-shouldered figure from European paintings. Based on skeletal remains from that era, the average Semite male stood at about 5 feet 1 inch and weighed around 110 pounds. Now, don't mistake that for being weak or frail. Jesus worked as a carpenter for most of his life, meaning he was physically active and likely in great shape. Musk's team theorized that he was more muscular than traditional portraits suggest. Plus, given that he spent a lot of time outdoors, his skin was probably weathered and tanned, not the smooth, pale complexion we often see in Renaissance paintings. After months of work, the team finally unveiled their reconstruction, and gone was the tall, slender figure with European features. In his place stood a man with a strong, rugged face, deep-set dark eyes, short, curly hair, and a compact but powerful frame. In other words, a man who actually looked like he belonged in first-century Galilee. It's honestly kind of amazing to finally see a version of Jesus that makes historical sense. And so, without further ado, I present to you the first ever accurate portrait of Jesus Christ. So, what does this all mean? Well, for one, it forces us to rethink centuries of art and cultural depictions. The Jesus that has dominated Western imagery isn't based on reality, it's based on artistic interpretation. Mind blown? Same here. Did Elon Musk just single-handedly end racism? Chew on that while we move on to some lighter tidbits about the many alternative depictions of Jesus Christ over the years. Now, as I said earlier, Jesus is believed to be of all sorts of different races around the world. This is one of the holiest sites in Christianity, the Church of Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the place where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. The energy inside is something else. The air is thick with incense, the dim candle light flickers against ancient stone walls, and pilgrims from all over the world move through the space, some in prayer, some just taking it all in. But what really caught my attention were the Black Messiah drawings, powerful, striking images that challenge the whitewashed depictions of Jesus we've been spoon-fed for centuries. These drawings show Jesus with dark skin, afro-textured hair, and features that align with historical and biblical descriptions. And honestly, it makes sense. Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew. He wasn't a pale, blue-eyed figure straight out of a Renaissance painting. The drawings, scattered throughout different parts of the church, feel like quiet acts of rebellion, reminders of a truth that history and white colonialism has often tried to erase. Some are subtle, almost hidden, while others are more prominent, staring back at visitors as if daring them to reconsider what they've always believed. They challenge the Eurocentric imagery that dominates Western Christianity and bring Jesus back to his real roots. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre itself is a maze of history. It's a mix of different styles, built and rebuilt over the centuries by different Christian groups: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian, Apostolic. They all claim parts of it, sometimes leading to actual fights over territory. Yes, monks have thrown punches before, FYI. The atmosphere inside is intense. The stone walls, worn by centuries of footsteps and prayers, seem to whisper stories of faith, conflict, and devotion. Standing near the stone of anointing, where tradition says Jesus' body was prepared for burial, you really can't help but wonder, why is it so controversial to depict Jesus as he likely looked? These drawings feel like an attempt to reclaim something stolen, to correct a narrative that's been manipulated for far too long. And this isn't the only church that's doing this. When I first learned about how the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has always depicted Jesus, Mary, and other biblical figures as black, I had to sit with that for a moment. Not because it was shocking. I mean, honestly, it makes perfect sense. But because, once again, it made me realize just how deeply ingrained the whitewashed image of Jesus is in the Western world. We've been so conditioned to see a pale-skinned, light-haired Messiah that anything else feels unexpected when, really, the European version is the outlier. Ethiopia has been practicing Christianity since the earliest days of the faith, long before European missionaries started spreading their own interpretations. And unlike the sanitized, Eurocentric artwork that so many of us grew up with, Ethiopian Orthodox churches are covered in vibrant, unapologetically African depictions of Jesus. He's painted with deep brown skin, tightly curled hair, and strong African features, not as some Italian nobleman in a robe, but as someone who actually reflects the people of the region where he lived. I've seen photos of the artwork inside the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, and they are breathtaking. Carved straight into the mountains centuries ago, these churches are filled with ancient murals and religious icons that tell the biblical story through an African lens. And then there's Addis Ababa's Holy Trinity Cathedral, another place where the imagery is unmistakable. Jesus, Mary, and the saints are black, regal, and powerful. What's fascinating is that these depictions weren't created as some sort of modern political statement. They weren't designed to be diverse or inclusive in the way Western institutions often treat representation today. This was simply how Ethiopian Christians always saw Jesus, because it was historically and culturally accurate. So why did we get stuck on this European fantasy version of Christ? The answer, of course, is colonialism. White Jesus was a tool, a symbol of European dominance that helped justify slavery, imperialism, and forced conversions. But Ethiopia never bought into that. They held on to their truth, and to this day, their churches stand as a reminder that Christianity isn't, and never was, a white man's religion. Then there's La Virgen Morena, the dark-skinned Virgin Mary venerated in Mexico. I mean, I grew up seeing religious paintings where Mary looked like some European queen. Pale skin, delicate features, always wrapped in blue and gold. But in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, Mary is something completely different. She's not a European noblewoman. She's an indigenous woman with dark skin and indigenous features. And to millions of people, she's the most powerful religious figure in Latin America. The story behind Our Lady of Guadalupe is fascinating. According to legend, in 1531, an indigenous man named Juan Diego saw a vision of the Virgin Mary on Tepeyac Hill, the very place where an Aztec temple once stood. But this Mary didn't look like the ones the Spanish had brought with them. She looked like him. She spoke to him in Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, and told him to ask the Spanish bishop to build a church in her honor. Naturally, the bishop didn't believe him until Mary made roses bloom in the middle of winter and left her image imprinted on Juan Diego's cloak. That image is La Virgen de Guadalupe, the one that still hangs in the basilica today, standing in that massive church, surrounded by millions of pilgrims who travel from all over the world to see her. I couldn't help but think about how revolutionary she is. She's become a symbol of resistance. At a time when Spanish colonizers were forcing indigenous people to abandon their culture, she appeared as one of them. She told them, "You belong here. Your identity matters. Your faith is yours, not just something imposed on you." The Shrine of the Black Madonna is a name that came up during a deep dive into the history of the civil rights movement, founded in the 1960s by Reverend Albert B. Cleage Jr., who later took the name Jaramogi Abebe Agyeman. This church is part of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. What struck me was their bold move to depict Jesus and Mary with African features, challenging the typical European portrayals. The first shrine opened its doors in Detroit in 1967, and since then, they've expanded to places like Atlanta and Houston. Their mission? To empower Black communities by reconnecting them with their African roots within Christianity. Walking into one of these churches, you're immediately greeted by powerful images of a Black Madonna and child, a testament to their commitment to reclaiming their narrative. Reverend Cleage was a pivotal figure in this movement. He believed that for Black people to truly find liberation, they needed to see themselves in their faith. By presenting biblical figures as Black, the church offers a sense of pride and identity that's often missing in mainstream religious institutions. The shrines aren't just about worship, they're community hubs. They host cultural events, educational programs, and discussions that address the unique challenges faced by Black communities. It's a space where faith and culture intertwine, offering a holistic approach to spiritual and social well-being. Now, I've actually visited this next one in person, and you might have heard about them a lot in the news. St. Sabina Catholic Church in Chicago. When I went on in, it felt like I was finally in a place that spoke my language. The moment I walked in, I could see the passion for racial justice all around me. This church isn't like the ones I grew up with. It proudly embraces Black religious art and imagery, and that immediately struck a chord with me. Inside, every corner of the church tells a story. I saw paintings of Jesus and other biblical figures that looked like they could be my own family members. They're not the typical white figures I was used to. Here, Jesus has dark skin and African features, just like many of us. That simple shift in imagery made me feel seen and understood in a way I hadn't experienced before. I even caught myself smiling. What really blew me away was how every piece of art felt like a part of a bigger conversation. A conversation about inclusion and historical truth. I spent a long time just walking around, looking at murals and paintings that reflected not just art, but a deep commitment to racial justice. I could tell that the people behind these works wanted to challenge the old, narrow images of our faith. It made me proud to be part of a community that stands up for what's real and authentic. I felt a personal connection with the art here. In fact, it's not even just about the art. This place is known for being a super cool community. They host block parties, cookouts, all of the stuff that stands for Black unity and identity. It's not some outdated and performative church. In fact, I found it to be really nicely rooted in modernity and how we live our lives today. It's like they're accepting the fact that this isn't the same ages as when the Bible first dropped. I like to call it Religion 2025. Now, I've always been curious about the Church of St. George in Cairo, Egypt. I have never been there myself, but the stories I've read make it feel like a hidden gem in a busy city. This church is one of the most important sites in Coptic Cairo and a key part of Coptic Christianity, one of the oldest forms of our faith. To me, it is a window into a deep and rich history. I like to picture the church in my mind. It is a small, old building with thick stone walls that have stood for many years. The church does not have fancy decorations or shiny details like many modern churches. Instead, it has a humble look that tells a story of hard work and deep belief. I imagine a quiet courtyard where people once gathered to pray and share stories. The simple design makes it feel warm to me. I also learned that the church is in the heart of Coptic Cairo, an area full of narrow, winding streets and old buildings. The Church of St. George fits right in with its neighbors, like the Hanging Church and adds to the old, rich feel of the area. I think of the many people who walked these streets and came to this church to pray. That thought makes me feel connected to a long, hidden history. One thing that really stands out to me is how the church shows Jesus and the saints. In many places, I have seen pictures of a white Jesus, but here, I read that the icons and frescoes show Jesus and the saints with darker skin. This fits with the real history of the region and the people who live there. For me, this is very strong because it shows a truer picture of our past. The church reminds me that faith comes in many forms, and that history is richer than what we often see. It makes me proud to know there are places in the world that hold on to the truth of their past, and I find that truly inspiring. Notre Dame de Paris is one of the most famous churches in the world. It's massive, ancient, and full of history. When people think of it, they probably picture its huge towers, the gargoyles staring down from above, or the colorful stained glass windows. But what a lot of people don't know is that even this centuries-old cathedral has started to challenge the usual images of Christianity. One of the things that stands out to me is the presence of black saints in the artwork. Saint Maurice, for example, is represented in statues inside the church. I think it's powerful that a place as iconic as Notre Dame acknowledges that Christianity has always been diverse, even if history books often ignore that fact. It makes me wonder why so many churches have resisted showing this kind of representation for so long. The fact that Notre Dame has included these figures tells me that times are changing, even in places where tradition is everything. The church itself is a masterpiece of Gothic architecture. It's been standing for over 800 years, surviving wars, revolutions, and even a massive fire in 2019. When I think about that, I can't help but see it as a symbol of resilience. It has been rebuilt and restored time and time again, just like the way religious imagery is being re-examined and reshaped today. There's something poetic about that. One of the things I really respect is that conversations about religious imagery are happening more often now. I've seen so many paintings and statues of Jesus and the saints that look nothing like the people from their actual regions. It never made sense to me. So when I hear that Notre Dame, one of the most famous churches in the world, is becoming part of that discussion, it gives me hope. Maybe this is the start of something bigger. Now I feel like I've gone on way too long about Jesus Christ and his true appearance, so I want to wrap up this video by introducing you to one last unconventional church. You know, since we're on the subject of moving away from religious tradition. This is as weird as it gets. This is the St. John Coltrane Church in San Francisco. The church was founded back in 1965 by Franzo and Marina King. Their story is pretty amazing. They went to see John Coltrane perform live, and the experience was so powerful that it felt like a spiritual awakening to them. This profound moment led them to start a church that celebrates Coltrane's music as a form of worship. I find it incredible how a single concert could inspire such a lasting spiritual movement. What's really cool about the St. John Coltrane Church is how they incorporate jazz into their services. From what I've read, their Sunday gatherings are a mix of live jam sessions and traditional liturgy. Musicians play Coltrane's compositions, and the congregation joins in, creating an atmosphere that's both soulful and uplifting. It's not your typical church service, and that's what makes it so special. I can only imagine the energy in the room, with everyone connecting through the universal language of music. The church has faced its share of challenges over the years, including relocations and financial struggles. Despite these hurdles, the community remains strong and dedicated. They've managed to keep the spirit of Coltrane alive, offering a space where people can explore their spirituality through jazz. I think it's a testament to the power of music and faith coming together. One thing that stands out to me is how the church honors Coltrane not just as a musician, but as a spiritual figure. They've even created icons depicting him, blending traditional religious art with modern influences. This unique approach challenges conventional ideas of worship and shows how spirituality can evolve and adapt. And that's all for today. So did this video open up your mind about how we perceive religion?